Hi everyone, this is Mrs. B with my friend Molly. My daughter has had a Molly. She doesn't live with me anymore. She's married with her own little girl. But Molly was her favorite when she was growing up, and that's the doll she got for a present one year. And Molly was very well loved. So she's going to be here listening with us today, and maybe you're holding your dolls too. I'm going to get started. If you see me leaning from time to time, it's because I'm picking up something I want to show you, just like I do in our usual class, and that's what we're going to be doing for a while now, maybe the rest of the school year. Well, I want to get started and talk to you where we left off the last time. We were talking about ways that people helped out during the war. We talked about World War II starting overseas in Europe and in Asia, and then when Pearl Harbor in Hawaii was attacked by the Japanese, our country got into the war. And what we're going to focus on is what Molly and her family was involved with. Her father was overseas serving in England, but they were home on the home front, and they were learning to make do with what needed to be done at that time. And to do without some things, make some sacrifices. And that's what we're going to talk about today, is recycling and rationing. And we're going to start with where we left off. We talked about last time, we kind of hurried so we could get to our craft in class, but we started talking about recycling aluminum. And I showed you a pan, and I said this is an example of something that would be aluminum that they could recycle. We also passed foil around the room and added to each other's piece until we got a nice little ball. Now think if your family was saving that over a period of time, maybe several weeks. The ball could be quite big, or maybe a neighborhood, or a church, or a class. And what kids would do back then to help out is they get their wagon and go from house to house and collect aluminum from people, knock on their door and see if anybody had any to share that week. And maybe the next week they did, or one week they didn't, the next week they did, whatever, but people were saving it. Here's something else that has aluminum. Canned goods. That would be a good thing to share, an empty can when you're done with it for aluminum. So they would collect aluminum. I have a couple of pictures I'm going to show you. Here's some kids, well, I'll just show you this one for now. There's some kids collecting scrap aluminum in a big barrel. And so when they collected enough, and that's from the 40s, they would dump it in there, and that would help with the situation. Sometimes classes would have competitions. Let's say one grade against another, like see if my class can get more than your class kind of thing. And it was just kind of a fun way to have a contest so they could get more aluminum. Okay? So aluminum was important. Aluminum was used for weapons, jeeps, trucks, equipment for the war. So that was important. Another thing they needed for the war was erasers, because they're made out of rubber. Rubber was needed. Now this tiny little eraser probably wouldn't do much good. It's kind of worn out. But if you have a new pencil with a new eraser and you got a lot of them, you could take that eraser out, or people used to use erasers that were about this big or so. We used them more often back in the older days, and save those. Or how about a tire from your bicycle? Or your parents might have an extra spare tire from their car. Things like that were rubber. And again, rubber was needed to help with wheels, tires, etc., different pieces of equipment in the war. So there were a lot of things that kids could do to help out. One thing I didn't share before, which I meant to show you a picture of too, and I think we'd looked at this before, was a little girl with some toys made out of aluminum that she donated for the war effort. Back then, if you had a toy, it would be more likely to be handmade. And metal toys, maybe you really enjoyed some of them, but the war needed them. So there were times where you had to sacrifice, or you were encouraged to sacrifice, to give up maybe one of your toys, and maybe two eventually. It depended on your situation. Here's a toy that was handmade. I know when my dad and mom got married and they didn't have a lot of money, and it was right after the war, it wasn't during the war, my dad handmade wooden presents for my older siblings for Christmas. And here's a teddy bear that was handmade. This teddy bear is made out of corduroy, just like the book, corduroy. And he has overalls on, just like corduroy does, only no buttons. So we can't lose any buttons like corduroy did. But he has buttons for eyes, and embroidered nose and embroidered mouth. You can barely see it, but it's red. All his parts are sewn on, and so is his outfit handmade. And my aunt made this for my brother when he was a little guy. So people made do, and they used their talents, and they made toys instead of buying as much. And that's another way that we helped out during the war. Okay, let's move on to another item of clothing. Another way to keep things going, or help the war effort, is what I'm trying to say, is clothing. Clothing back then was needed. Cloth was needed because we had soldiers that needed clothes. There was tons, millions of shirts and pants and coats, hats for uniforms, etc., that they needed. So socks were harder to get because the fabric needed for that went to them. Women were just starting to wear pants more often. That was kind of a new thing to cover their legs since they didn't have socks. You would make sure your clothes lasted longer. Here's an example of a towel that was worn out, and when my daughter was little, she cut this out. These are two little dogs that were on the towel, and she made a pillow out of it. And the reason I'm showing you this is this would be a great, when something's worn out, to save some part of it that's good, like these cute little dogs on an otherwise white, worn out towel, would be a good patch. Maybe your skirt has a rip in it, and you could sew that on your skirt or somewhere else on your outfit. You made do. You kept things longer. You stitched them up or patched them up. And if you couldn't fix them, maybe your mom could take one of her dresses that was wearing out in the elbow, and she'd already fixed it several times, and had a little tear in the skirt part or whatever. She could take that dress apart and make a new dress for you, for her young daughter, because of course you're smaller and you wouldn't need as much fabric. And she could redesign a new outfit for you. So there were a lot of clever ways to make do, and their outfits were thinner, more tightly fitted, more not loose and baggy, but more tightly fitted, because you didn't need as much fabric that way. If you had a close-fitting outfit, almost like a uniform fit, that was more of a style back then. I'm going to show you something else that they used. This is called a dickie. This is, as you can see, a collar, or turtleneck collar in this case, and it looks like a part of a shirt, but it's not all there, is it? I'm going to put it over my head to show you what it looks like. Here we go. This is my shirt. Now, if I had a jacket, I don't have one right here right now, but if I did, here we go. I'm going to use this tablecloth that I'm going to use for something else. I'll put it around my shoulders like it was a jacket. And if you're going to look at me from this angle, you don't see that I don't have a shirt, a white shirt on underneath. You see this peeking out and you think, oh, she's got on a white shirt underneath. And you don't even know that it's a dickie, which is what this is, which is just a piece of a shirt. That saved a lot of fabric. You don't need the whole shirt underneath if you have a jacket or a sweater over it. And that was a good way